Hi folks, this is Ali Nisse, and I have with me a new product sample that was sent to me by the manufacturer of the Endosequence files internationally, the BUSA dental instrumentation company. And what they are doing is they've sent me a sample of the new Endosequence Express files that are going to be available now internationally. So finally, the Endosequence file is available internationally for those of you interested in using that technique, because previously Endosequence was only available in North America, but now this version of it now, Endosequence Express, is available internationally for those interested. Before we go ahead and try these clinically and see how they work, I'd like to just kind of go over this technique card that they sent me and basically go over the manufacturer recommendations for their proper use, and then I may kind of throw in some of my recommendations for their use as well. The technique card is very similar to the original Endosequence technique. In the Endosequence Express series, you basically have three files per procedural pack. However, the procedural packs still come in sizes small, medium, and large, and they contain specific sizes. And how you decide which procedural pack you need to open for a given canal depends on the first file that you use in the canal, which is a size 1502. Here in the Endosequence Express card, you use the 1502 hand file to gauge the canal and determine which procedural pack you need to open in order to complete that canal. So it's very important to understand that the recommendation here is to first enlarge the canal to a size 1502 hand file before using your rotary files to enlarge it. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because it is true that most of us really would like to avoid using hand files, but the reality of the matter is that stainless steel hand files are still the most predictable way you can gain length, and they're stronger than nickel titanium. Therefore, it's a more logical choice in order to gain your length first before you move to nickel titaniums, so that most efficiently you can enlarge the canals laterally and get your final canal shape. So in the Endosequence Express protocol, you have to get a 1502 hand file down to the apex first, and if it's a very tough case, you may have to do size 8, 10 before you reach the 15. You do your coronal enlargement first too. Obviously, that's a part of the access. You have to have enlarge the top and have a good access. Do your size 8, 10, and 15 down to the apex, and depending on how much resistance the 1502 hand file experiences by the time it reaches the full apex, then you're dealing with either a significant, with a small, medium, or large procedural pack. In the original Endosequence technique, the small, medium, and large packs, which have 4 files, you would use them in a crown down technique, and you would use a rhythm kind of a motion. What the rhythm motion was basically 1 stroke to engagement, 2 stroke to engagement, 3 stroke to engagement, then you would remove the file and you wipe it, so you remove basically the debris from the chip space. And then you could use each file in 2 rhythm motions, and then follow and step down to a 1 size smaller file. So in both the original Endosequence and now in the Endosequence Express technique, the recommended way of using the files in the procedural pack is a step down or a crown down fashion, so that you start from the largest file first, you do 1 rhythm motion, and then you move down 1 size. So let's assume that I have a molar canal and I get a size 1502 hand file to the working length finally, and I decide that it was significant engagement, so I'm opening a small procedural pack which contains sizes 30, 25, and 20. The first thing I'm going to do is use the size 30 with a rhythm motion, so 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3 stroke, remove, wipe the file, and then 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3 stroke, remove the file, wipe it. Then move 1 file size smaller to a size 25 and follow the same technique of either 1 or 2 rhythm motions, and then go down 1 size. So I personally like to call this action of going from the largest size in a procedural pack to the smallest file, a cycle. And what that means is that if I reach the smallest file in that cycle and I still haven't reached the full working length that I originally reached with my 1502, then I would go back to the beginning. So what I would do is I do 30, 25, 20. If I'm not at the full working length yet, I go back to the size 30 again. And I follow the cycle of 30 down to 20, 30 down to 20 in a small procedural pack, for example, until the file that I want reaches the full working length. And that often is the first file that reaches the working length. But sometimes if the first file reaches the full working length and I feel like it's still too loose in there and I could go one size higher, then I may go one size higher and then finish it at that size. So I hope it's clear. You're probably going to understand it a little bit better once we see it clinically how it's used. But the idea is get a 1502 hand file down to the working length, and the reason you're using is 1502 stainless steel hand file is because it's more predictable and it's safer to always do that no matter what instrumentation technique you're using. And then once you do that, based on how much engagement that 1502 had on the way down, you decide what kind of a canal you're dealing with. Is it a small, medium, or large size procedural pack that is needed for that canal? And then open the corresponding size and do a cycle of largest to the smallest size, and if you don't reach the working length on the first cycle, then you continue these cycles until you reach it. So that's basically it. But of course, the proof is in the pudding. So let's take a look at see how it works clinically. Let's put this file through its paces and see if it can perform clinically as well as on the technique card.
Okay, I have a necrotic maxillary second molar for you. As you can see, there is a lesion there, and there is also a poorly fitting crown, which is one of the modern onlays using lithium disilicate. And the best way to access through these materials is using this DuraCut bars, which is very efficient and at the same time very safe. It does take quite a while to access through them. It requires a light touch and a lot of water. So once outline form has been created, then we're going to move on to use a saber cut burr to very efficiently in the dentin make the opening that can allow us to remove the roof of the pulp chamber, followed by using the DuraCut in a thin tapered form in order to make everything flow in the axis towards the orifices. The ultrasonic with an E14D tip also further cleans and merges everything towards the axis. Once the orifices have been identified, an orifice opener, in this case I'm using a 2008 ESX orifice opener, you can use whatever you prefer to do some coronal enlargement, the upper half, and every time I'm using orifice openers I follow that up with ultrasonics and water to remove any debris that's been cut off. At this point we have axis opening in the upper half of the root, and now it's time to move on to using our hand instruments to manage the apex and negotiate to the end of the root. Here a size 10 and moves down to the apex fairly easily. A size 15 is moderately engaged on its way down to the apex. Working length is measured using an apex locator and an x-ray to confirm. And because we had only moderate amount of engagement in this number 15 hand file, going down a medium pack of Endosequence Express files are used, and they're used in a crown down fashion using 40 followed by 35 followed by 30 in these little cycles using the rhythm technique. So the 4004 is the first one, and as you can see we're using the rhythm technique, which is 3 strokes, 2 engagement followed by wiping, and we do 2 passes in each canal using given file. And then once that is done, we move one size file smaller. So we started with a size 40 in each canal, a couple of passes, and then we move to a 35. But in between files, I recommend that you actually use ultrasonics and water or some kind of a mode of removing any kind of a debris that may have come loose. And then you can add sodium hypochlorite to that to make it a disinfectant. And then after the size 40, we're now using a size 35 in the same exact way, using a crown down fashion, and in each canal 2 passes of rhythm motion. And then after 35 we're moving to a size 30. Again, between each file you do the same ultrasonic and water removal of the debris, followed by adding a disinfectant. So we use this cycle, and now the size 35 reaches the apex in each canal. So what we've done is after a couple of cycles of 40 down to 30, our 35 reaches the apex, and we're choosing that as our master file in each canal. And then we do our gross disinfection using negative pressure here that I'm using. You can use whatever technique that you have in mind. And following thorough disinfection of the surfaces, you do your cone fitting. You can use the Endosequence biceramic coated BC cones and fit them to full working length. And here using the biceramic sealer again for obturation, and what I'm doing is I'm injecting in the upper half of the canal and then using a file to push the sealer down to the full working length. It's important not to try to, if you're going to use the biceramic sealer with the injection technique, not to try to inject it all the way down to the apex, but only on the top and then push it down with your file. I'm now searing off the handle of each catapercha right at the orifice, and I'm using shoulder pluggers sizes 9 and 10 to plug right at the orifice. And using the ultrasonic and water is the best way to remove the sealer. And here is the core material that's placed immediately after. And here's the final x-ray. You can see these canals are filled adequately, and there's a ribbon-shaped kind of a canal in the mesiobuccal root that basically is as a result of its the shaping of this particular root. And that's basically it.
Okay, as you saw, the Endosequence Express file and the technique is a robust way of addressing your clinical needs for rotary instrumentation. And it is now available internationally, the Endosequence Express, the filing system and obturation system that goes along with the use of biceramics. And it is a very robust and predictable way to efficiently instrument your root canals. If you have any questions, please post them at our website, realworldendo.com. You can go onto the forum area and ask your questions. For Real World Endo, I'm Ali Nasseh, and I hope you found this information helpful.